In the very heart of North America, almost lost among the grasslands of the northern plains, lies a valley that doesn't belong, among hills held over from another era. The little river that meanders through it is the pale ghost of a torrent that once would have dwarfed the Amazon. Along its banks, rank upon rank of white spruce, the rear guard of an ancient army, left behind to do battle in a war that is as old as life itself. Up the side of the valley they march, rising out of the mist to confront their mortal enemy, the barren and windswept hills we call the Spirit Sands. The approach to the Spirit Sands takes us across the broad prairie parkland, where the battle for life was won long ago, and decisively. Then, instead of aspen groves and fields of grain, a line of white spruce rises in our path. What is a spruce forest doing 200 kilometers from its natural home? And why, at its center, 1,000 kilometers from any desert, is there a huge plateau of barren sand? The answers take us back 11,000 years to the end of the last ice age. As the glaciers melted, an enormous lake formed over much of today's prairie. A mighty river, 2 kilometers across, brought meltwater down from the Rockies. Where that river entered Lake Agassiz, it deposited a sand delta that stretched over 6,500 square kilometers. When the lake retreated and the river fell, the delta was left high and dry. Immediately, life began to stake its claim. Over the next 10,000 years, each climate change brought new challenges to the sand. Climate warming brought cactus and tough shortgrasses from the arid southwest. When the climate cooled, the boreal forest pushed south again. This in turn gave way to the warmer and drier prairie that we see today, with its tall grasses and groves of oak and aspen. Each plant community did battle with the sand, and little by little, the sands gave way. Until today, the last remnant of this once vast delta clings tenuously to existence, pressed on all sides by invading life. Against this persistent encroachment, the sands have mustered some impressive defenses, and life that moves in too far or too fast soon feels their sting. Living things may venture onto the dunes at night, but the rising sun soon drives them back to the shelter of the surrounding vegetation. The one species to make its home in the open sand survives only by escaping the daytime heat. The wolf spider spends the night at the mouth of its burrow, preying on passing insects. With daylight, the spider retreats into its hole and closes the entrance behind it. It seals the opening with web silk and descends a meter or more into the cool depths, leaving the surface to the ravages of wind and sun. As surface temperatures climb to 55 degrees Celsius, no living thing can thrive, not even the bacteria of decay. Despite this, vegetation continues its relentless invasion. In an age when the great deserts of the world are expanding, this one is losing ground. The reasons behind these apparent contradictions explain both the history of the spirit sands and the singular mix of plants and animals that surround them. The key to the mystery lies in the vegetation itself. The white spruce, for example, has disappeared from the surrounding prairie precisely because the climate has become too dry. Yet, in these apparently parched hills, it thrives. The lady slippers that shelter beneath the spruce are also typically found in cool, wet surroundings. Their presence here declares that despite the dunes, a plentiful source of moisture is close at hand. A nearby spring confirms it, a wealth of water hidden just below the surface. The porous sands, it turns out, are an enormous sponge, absorbing moisture that would run off the surrounding prairies. A wet layer forms below, even as wind and sun turn the surface into a desert. It is as though two natural environments existed in the same place, one below the other. The contrasts and contradictions this has produced make these hills unique in the world. So, although the boreal forest has moved north, its remnants survive here by exploiting the damp subsoil, while only a few feet away, a relict of the southwestern desert thrives on the dry surface layer. Ironically, in these contradictory hills, it is not the cactus that invades the dunes. That task is left to plants adapted to both heat and water. These are plants that combine a resistance to sun and wind with a deep root that can seek out buried moisture. The skeleton weed is typical, with its sinewy, almost leafless stems above a long, probing root. Likewise, sand dock, with its low profile, thick leaves, and tough papery blossoms. A heavy root supplies water and an anchor against the fierce winds, while the fleshy leaves store moisture against the desert-like heat of the dune face. Big bluestem can reach 2 meters in height and send roots down just as far. These invader plants are the assault troops in life's battle with the open sands. The invaders bring other life. The sandbar willow, for example, is often accompanied by the sand dune ant, a resourceful insect who has learned to survive on whatever presents itself. From the sap of the willow to a luckless wasp that lands too close. While the invaders seize the open ground, a second wave of slightly less hardy plants attack the dune faces. In one area, it might be the prairie sunflower, while nearby a clump of woods rose has taken hold. At the edge of the dunes, a snake particularly well adapted to the loose sandy soil of its home. The western hognose gets its name from its shovel-shaped nose, which it uses to dig protective burrows and to pursue the small animals it likes to eat. Brought here by the warm southwestern climate, the hognose survives today by hibernating in burrows below the reach of the freezing winter. Nearby, Manitoba's only lizard, the northern prairie skink. Another relic of warmer times, the skink, too, survives the wicked prairie winter by burrowing into the sand and loose soil to hibernate in relative warmth. Come summer, the grasslands provide plenty of food. Conveniently, the next course presents itself, right on time. Moving back from the dune face, the vegetation thickens. We begin to see the wolf willow, whose fragrance dominates the springtime air, and beneath it, creeping juniper with its berry-like cones. The cumulative effect of this denser growth is to reduce wind velocity at ground level, creating a buffer zone for delicate new growth. When that buffer zone is wide enough, the boreal forest plants can move in, white spruce and juniper, as well as oak and aspen. Throughout the history of the sands, as climate and vegetation have changed, this pattern of invasion and occupation has remained essentially the same. And while vegetation has inexorably advanced, it has been met at every stage by determined opposition. The weapon of the dunes is sand itself. Sand and its ally, the fierce prairie wind. If yesterday belonged to the sands, today belongs to life. Recovered from their battering, the forces of life are once again poised to go on the offensive. And today, the weather is on life's side. As the land warms, columns of air begin to rise, laden with last night's dew. Soon the updrafts produce their inevitable results. Turkey vultures dance on the currents as they search for carrion. Here, in one rainstorm, is the whole story of life's success in its struggle to conquer the sands. It's simple arithmetic. More water falls on these sands than is lost through runoff and evaporation. And wherever temperatures permit, water will bring forth life. Nowhere else in Canada, probably nowhere on Earth, does this mix of desert, grassland, and forest come together in one place. Brought here by the cycles of climate, kept here and held in tenuous balance by the rough impostor at their center, this desert that is not a desert. But life's struggle of conquest is nearly complete. After 10,000 years, the sands, as we see them, will soon disappear completely. A unique natural museum will cease to be. It won't happen overnight. There are still many battles to be fought. It may take another century, but the eventual outcome is not in doubt. Like a conqueror's flag, a stand of cottonwood rises from the crest of one of the last dune formations. Instead of creek bed or riverbank, these water lovers have picked the most exposed spot they could find to make their stand. And despite the sand's best efforts to dislodge them, they have held. In the long seesaw war between life and the sands, there could be no better symbol of what that war has been about, and of who the ultimate victor will be.